welcome to an episode of the Cables to Clouds Cloud Demystified demo series. So if you're not familiar with Cables to Clouds, we run a hybrid cloud-focused podcast called Cables to Clouds, and you can check us out at www.cablestoclouds.com. You can find all the links for the podcast, show notes, things like that, all that on the website there. Also part of the Art of Network Engineering. And today we're going to be doing a demo on AWS CloudWAN. So we've brought in Ruskin with us, who's a senior solutions architect over at AWS. So just to give some background here, we did a full podcast episode about AWS CloudWAN already. We kind of dug into what the story of CloudWAN was, what are the capabilities, why to use it, pain points, what's the value add of AWS CloudWAN. So if you're more interested in hearing the backstory about CloudWAN, we'll put all the links to that podcast and there's a visual component as well. Episode 2 in the show notes. Sorry. And today we're really going to focus on the how of CloudWAN. We're gonna get a visual demo on how this operates, how to interact with the AWS dashboard to build a global network in AWS CloudWAN. So on that note, I'll hand it over to you, Ruskin, and take it away.
Awesome. So thanks, Chris. This has been a long show in the making, I would say, like with weather and people falling sick. So really good to finally get the show on the road. So appreciate it. So thanks for the awesome introduction. I'm Ruskin. I'm actually based out of Auckland, New Zealand. I work for AWS. And it's such a privilege to kind of be doing this with AWS CloudWAN. It's a service I quite adore. It makes it so much simpler. And we want to keep today's show really interactive, right? So we have about an hour's presentation content, but we want to keep it real interactive. So ask any questions as you see in the console. I'll try and do my best to answer them all. And hopefully we cover a lot of cool stuff, how to set up CloudWAN, what it is about, what are some of the cool features of CloudWAN, some of the visual aspects, some of the monitoring aspects. I'll try and touch on all of them. If I forget any, just kind of keep me honest and ask me, and we can dive into it. So let's get cracking. So I have about 3 screens, three windows open on my screen, right? I'll be switching into each of these as we go through the presentation. So I just want to let you know what each of them are, so when you're looking at them, you don't get confused. So the first one is essentially a PowerPoint presentation, which is currently in focus right now. And as you can see, I'm just going to use it as a backdrop, right? So we're not going to be touching that a lot. We're going to be mostly looking at the AWS console, but the PowerPoint is essentially kind of a visual representation of what we're kind of currently demoing. It helps to kind of drive that message home. So that's what that is about. The other window, which is this little window here, which is my AWS console. So we're going to be doing a lot of stuff in there. So, going to the VPC pages, EC2, opening up Session Manager and doing some ping tests, all sorts of cool stuff, right? And finally, in the background, I have a Visual Studio Code environment. So I've spun up a few VPCs and things like that. And because I'm lazy, I've used CDK, which is awesome. It lets you spin up a lot of cool stuff very quickly without much effort. So I've done that, and I've got a few scripts prepared as well. Things like deploying a policy for CloudWAN, for example. So we'll see how we can do it using the console. But again, whatever we show you through the console can be done via the CLI as well. It kind of just drives that, gives you a different flavor of how you would go about doing it. So if you're a person big on automation, definitely look at the CLI, and even talk a little bit about the DevOps principles as well, right? As you deploy, just highly distributed regional networks across. So that's highly recommended as well. So those are the 3 windows. So let's, any questions on that before we dive in? Otherwise, no. Cool. Yeah, awesome. So today we're going to be looking at 3 regions, right? So of course, CloudWAN is designed to be globally distributed, bring in as many regions as you can or as you want. But we want to concentrate on 3 regions just to kind of keep the demo nice and simple and something to kind of be easy to digest through the 1 hour. We're going to be deploying some infrastructure. In fact, we have already deployed some infrastructure, and I'll show you that as well, in 3 regions, which is Ohio, Mumbai, and Sydney. And those are the 3 main regions we're going to be looking at today. For the purpose of this exercise, what I've also done is I have deployed some VPCs. So, I talked about Visual Studio Code and CDK in the background and CLI. So I've taken the liberty to actually deploy some VPCs in these regions, right? Just to kind of keep us running. Again, deploying VPCs is not in scope of this. We're going to be concentrating on CloudWAN today. So this allows you to kind of drive that message home. So we've got a prod VPC and a dev VPC in each of these regions. And we're going to be showing you how to connect them up using CloudWAN, for example. So today, what we're going to be doing is essentially connecting up the dev VPCs and looking at how we can connect up the prod VPCs. And as I mentioned in the previous episode of Cables to Clouds, CloudWAN is essentially that it does that BGP and monitoring and connectivity for you in the background, so you don't have to do any of that undifferentiated heavy lifting. So you've got these what we call segments, essentially, like or routing domains, for example. So we got a production segment and we've got a non-production segment, and all we do is essentially bring in attachments into it as we need to, using some sort of policy. And which is defined at the top of that slide deck, which is your core network policy. And we'll look at that as well. So we've started off with a standard, like a boilerplate core network policy. And what that policy essentially does is allows your non-production VPCs to communicate to each other. And it's isolating your production VPC. So that means none of the production workloads can connect to each other. And I've just kind of chosen to do it that way. But again, this is configurable, and we'll show you how to do that via policy to kind of drive that message home. So just give you a little bit of your IT. Each of those pink little round things you see on the screen are your core network edges, right? So each region where you want to deploy your CloudWAN into essentially is a core network edge. And CloudWAN looks after that BGP and your connectivity between those core network edge based on the network policy you have. So that's the visual representation of it. So what we've done in this diagram is essentially showed you that we have a few dev VPCs in these three regions. And the green arrow kind of annotates that anything in the non-production segment should be able to communicate to each other, right? And the next one, I have kind of shown a red line. So anything in the production workload, just to kind of drive one of those features of the policy home where you can actually isolate these attachments, I've actually made it so none of the workloads in a prod VPC can talk to each other. And we'll demonstrate that as well. So that's the setup we have got so far. And we'll be like building a little bit on top of that. So any questions on the setup before we dive into the console?
So how much of this has all of this been built using the CDK, and then we'll just kind of look at what it looks like in the console from here?
So yeah, it's always interesting how much we can pre-build and build it up and do it during the demo. So I've deployed the VPCs myself. I've deployed the global network and the core network already as well, but I'll show you that a little bit. So the reason I've deployed the global network and core network already, including some of the attachments, is just to kind of save us time. So deploying a core network across the core network edges takes a little bit of time because it's quite distributed. So just the purpose of this demo, what I've done is I've actually done the core network deployment for us and the VPCs as well. So I have deployed connected up two of the regions, but I haven't connected up the Mumbai region, if I remember my setup correctly. So what we'll do is I'll show you how to connect up an extra VPC in another region through deploying some attachments and making it part of the policy, etc. So some setup has already been done just for the nature of the demo and to save us some time.
Just to kind of clarify what we are referring to as global network and core network here. So obviously the core network is this collection of network edges that you have deployed, and we're making it global by just deploying. You're telling the AWS CloudWAN that you want these network edges to be deployed in all of these regions, right? Because that's a pick and choose option. Is that correct?
Exactly right. And when I show you the policy, which you see on the top, that little rectangle, you can actually tell CloudWAN which regions you want to deploy your core network edges in, and it's all policy based, right? So in a policy, it's just as simple as adding an extra JSON a value in to say I want to deploy in another region, or you could even do it via the console as well. So let's just dive into it and actually we'll drive some of those messages home. Awesome.
Sounds good.
So standard stock standard AWS console. So if you go to VPC over here, that's where you get to CloudWAN. And let's scroll down slightly. You will see CloudWAN, and it will open up a new little tab. Let me zoom it in a little bit. And anytime if you think that it's not zoomed enough, just yell out because I have quite a big screen, so just in case.
Could we, yeah, maybe a little bit. Could we, and I know we're going to be going back and forth, so I don't want you to necessarily maximize it, but yeah, it might be helpful to just make it a little bit bigger so that everybody can see what's on the screen.
All good. How does that look? Is that a bit better?
That's better. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that's good to me.
Yeah, that looks good.
Perfect. All right. So as for this demo, we're going to be looking at this CloudWAN demo global network. I do have another global network as well, but let's just ignore it for now. It was for test purposes. So the question earlier, what have I deployed already? So obviously I've deployed a global network, and within the global network, let's dive a little bit deeper into it. You'll see that I've got these 3 network edges, right? So that's part of the core network. And up here you can see edge locations, which is 3, essentially the 3 regions which I described, right? So let me make this a little bit bigger. So you've got US East 2, which is Ohio, AP South 1, which is Mumbai, and AP Southeast 2, which is Sydney. And this is driven by policy. So let's look at what I mean by driven by policy, right? So let's look at core network here. So core network, let's go to policy versions. So the policies are essentially like JSON documents, which you can actually make changes to, and it actually versions them, and it shows you change sets as well. So you can actually do a diff between different policy versions and what they look like, right? So as we deploy changes to our core network, we can actually do a diff, verify them, approve them, and then deploy them, right? And the deployment steps takes a wee while depending on the change you're making. So we'll go through that as well. So right now, as you can see on the screen, we are currently live on policy version 15. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. Cool. As you can see on the screen, I have got a ASN range. I have got inside CIDR blocks, etc., for GRE tunnels or connect attachments, etc., which I'm not going to be demonstrating for this part. But at the bottom, if you notice, I've got edge locations, right? So the 3 edge locations we talked about, right? So we've got Mumbai, we've got Sydney and Ohio, and underneath that, we've got segments, which we talked about as well. So I've got a non-prod segment and a production segment. Actually, let me turn on my screen brush. Cool. And what that does, it allows me to actually draw on the screen, which is a little bit better. There we go. Okay. So I've got segments over here. And as you can see, there's a slight difference over here. So if you look at this isolate attachments, for non-prod, it's got no, and for prod, it's got yes. So essentially, this is what I was telling you before, right? So for non-prod, it actually is going to isolate any attachments you make to that segment. So any attachments you make to that segment will not be able to talk to each other. But in the non-prod, any attachments you attach to the non-prod segment should be able to talk to each other because they're not isolated, right? And even with the policy, it's got this other cool feature as well, which is saying require attachment acceptance. So every time you attach a item to your segment, it will either ask you whether you want to accept it or not accept it, right? So you can imagine an application developer or application product team is attaching one of these items to your one of these VPCs to your segment. Should they be requiring an acceptance by your network admin, for example? So for non-prod, you can make it quite relaxed. You can say no, they can attach it as they please. But for production, I need a little bit more rigor, and I want to make sure that I actually go in there and say yes, I want to make that attachment possible. So that's that flag there. So, what else?
The allow and deny, is that like a specific, you can drill down a little further and say specifically, I don't want this one segment to attach, or is that
exactly,
just more explicit? Correct. Okay.
So you can actually go in there, and I'll show you what it actually means when we actually go into edit this. So you can actually make it as customize as you need to by allowing a few segments or denying a few segments, right? And just underneath, you have this sharing segment as well. So in the second half of this demo today, we're going to be showing you how you can have a shared segment, which essentially allows all attachments or all the other segments to talk to it. Like, so you could be thinking of like a shared services, for example, or a shared egress, or an inspection segment or something like that, where you would have that shared across. Yep.
Yeah, like DNS services essentially located or something like
AD,
that. Right?
whatever it might be. Yeah, exactly. And then we also have some specific routes. So you could also explicitly customize which routes go to which segments as well. So your inspection one is quite a common one, where you have 0, all the default routes should go to inspection one. So that way you could actually customize it and say any traffic which is going to any traffic, I want to go to the inspection segment first, and from there it can route to whatever it needs to.
Quick question on the segments
Sure.
again. So if you have this setting enabled for isolated attachments, so what I'm gleaning from that is obviously as soon as an attachment is made, it's isolated from the other attachments within that segment. But you can also have an allow and deny segment list. I'm assuming that's cross segment communications, right? What would be the particular use case when you would always want your attachments to be isolated? Is it kind of a one-off scenario, or I'm curious how customers are using that today?
Yeah, so often we have conversations with highly regulated industries where they have, like even within a production environment, where they want some workloads to talk to each other, but then they have a PCI workload in production where they really want to isolate that PCI, to reduce that scope of the PCI nature, reduce the scope of the PCI workload. And that way you can actually isolate that fully out. So even within your production, you might want to communicate with each other, mostly within different workloads, but nothing can communicate to the PCI workload because that's fully isolated. So that's one use case I can think of. Other use cases might be similar around the compliance, regulatory, or like top secret use cases where it is still production, but it's still under development. The contracts are not fully established. You don't want people hitting the API and things like that. So it depends on your customer requirements.
Yeah, cool. I could definitely see a lot of federal government agencies using stuff like that, where even if in production, they still don't want things to touch.
Or maybe like an MSP type of use case where they have multiple customers, right? They have multiple customers, but they want them to be segmented from each other and reach, resources.
Yep, exactly. Awesome. And the last bit, which is attachment policies, and this is essentially the rules which tell when each attachment comes on board, which segment do you want to attach it to, right? So this is like your intent-based networking. So on the bottom, I've got a very simple one. Again, I haven't made it any more complicated just for the demo, so it's really easy to kind of understand. I've got a non-prod and a prod one. Essentially, when a attachment comes on board, it looks at the tag on the attachment. Just to be very clear, it looks at the tag on the attachment, not the VPC. And if the tag has a key called network with a value of non-prod, it will attach to the non-prod segment. And if it's got a value of prod, it will attach to the prod segment. So very, very simple logic here, just to kind of keep things quite easy to follow. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the policy itself. So let's have and obviously whatever we discussed here, this is the JSON behind it, right? So you can come in here and edit the JSON if you want to, or you can edit it using your GUI as well. So let's edit something here. We're not going to save it. We'll just edit it just to get the feel for it. So when you edit it, it doesn't edit your existing one. So when you're editing it, it actually creates a new version of the policy, right? So that's why when I clicked on edit, and if you see the right-hand side button on top there, it actually says create policy, not edit, right? So just to be very clear, you can actually look at change sets, and you can actually do a before and after comparison, and you're actually creating a new version of that policy, right? Awesome. So let's look at adding a new edge location or a core network edge, right? So this is what I was telling you before. you can actually add another region as well. I'm not going to do it because it takes ages to apply it, but it doesn't matter. I'm not going to apply this policy anyway. But this is where you would add an extra region in there. A new branch network comes on board in London. You want to add a core network edge there, and you want to connect it up. So this is where you would do that. Cool. Let's look at segments as well. So we've got 2 segments. You might want to add one more segment in again. So we can look at shared services, which we'll do down the line, but I'll just kind of quickly demo it. Requires acceptance, that flag I was talking about. Isolate attachments, again, we talked about this as well. And the segment filter over here as well. So you can allow a few particular segments. Currently, I only have 2. Or you can deny a particular segment. Again, I only have 2. You can also limit to specific edge locations as well. For example, you only want to connect to prod in Mumbai, not in prod in what was it, Ohio. You have that flexibility, right? So you can make it as complex as you want to, as you need to.
When you allow a segment, say that you created a shared, and obviously you would allow prod to talk to the shared segment or something. Is that just is the effect of that just going to be like route sharing between the 2 segments, or like what's the
exactly? Yeah, that's
Gotcha.
essentially what this does. It takes care of that routing for you in the background, the advertisements and things like that. Yeah.
So very much like very much like VRF at the end of the day, like
route targets.
Import export route targets, import export, that type of behavior.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's understandable. I understand that.
Awesome. And again, segment actions as well. So I'll show you a little bit about sharing when we add a shared segment. So you can come in here and you can say, I actually want to share this entire segment, and this is where you would create a sharing segment there if you wanted to. And finally, attachment policies. Again, this is let's edit one. Again, you can make it as complicated as you want. Over here, I've essentially just said, what's the segment name? It's non-prod. Inherit acceptance value from the segment. What is it? What's the condition? It's a tag value equals condition value network, and tag key network, and tag value non-prod. If it's like that, please attach it to the non-prod segment. Can't get simpler than that. Again, love to see customers' use cases on this and how complicated they've made it. And that'll be quite cool to see. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But I've made it quite simple right now.
Are we going to attach anything as part of the demo? Because I'm struggling a little bit with the I guess the nomenclature of like what an attachment ultimately is. I know there's like a VPC that you would attach, but you mentioned specifically that VPC is different than attachment. So I'd love to, once we get there, I'd love to see what this.
So yeah, let's do that actually. Let me cancel out of this. We don't need to create a policy. We'll come back to that. So let's go to attachments, right? And to make things a little bit easier, what I've actually got is I have got 2 attachments already in Ohio. I've got a dev Ohio attachment and a prod Ohio attachment, and 2 in Sydney as well. Again, dev and prod, right? So and you can see on the left over here, it's got VPC. So this is actually a VPC attachments, right? And what I can show you here is quickly a ping test between a couple of instances in the Sydney one and instances in the Ohio one. So let's just kind of look at the routing a little bit, right? And see how we can visualize that in our head. So let's open up the EC2 console.
Right, and we can do this because the dev segment is allowed essentially to talk between the C and E's, right?
Exactly, correct. Yeah. Awesome. So let's look at, apologies for the so many dev instances, but we'll touch a little bit on that. So let's look at Sydney dev CloudWAN demo instance, right? I'm going to go back to my presentation slide to drive some of those IP addresses, right? Oops, missed that a little bit. Where did it go? Cool. So we have our Sydney. So don't worry about the rest of it. Just let's look at the Sydney and Ohio one. So we've got on the console, we've got Sydney dev CloudWAN demo instance showing up. And that's IP address is 10.3.195, as you can see over here, this bit here. And if I go to my PowerPoint, that's this little box here, right? And it's green, so that means it's a non-production machine. And in Ohio, I've got a dev one, which is 10.4.3.133, and we can quickly look at that as well. Oops, let me exit my hide screen brush. And let me open up another one in Ohio, another tab. Let me zoom it in a little bit more. Cool. And I have got an Ohio dev one as well, which is 10.4.3.133, which is this one here. Right. So strictly speaking, I should be able to talk from the Sydney one to the Ohio one. So let's do that. So let me connect to the Ohio one. I'm just going to do a quick ping test. Cool, make it a little bit zoomed in. So ping, oops, it's gone all caps. Ping, I'm in Ohio. So let me just copy paste my Sydney IP address, which is this. Cool. All right. So I can connect from my Ohio one to my Sydney one, right? The ping is working. So let me stop that. Now let me try and connect.
Demigods are working.
Demigods are working. That's why I only want to stick to a ping, just keep it nice and simple. nothing too fancy here.
Sorry, if you did a trace route, would it show the hops?
I haven't tried, but let me try that. So
it's fine if it doesn't. I was just curious.
You'll have to. Oops, I spelled it wrong.
Because, I mean, to make it clear that I think you have to spell out the whole word route in Linux. But to be clear, though, I mean, we have no VPC peering. There's no TGW here. This is entirely CloudWAN, VPC inter-region, same segment, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So what is it showing me? So it is showing me one hop. I don't know. Okay. I'm not a trace route expert, so I'll have to dive a little bit deeper into it to understand how it is actually showing and what the hops.
It's just an answering. The hops aren't just they're just not they're essentially not answering, but that's fine because it's still only 3 hops.
Trace essentially, it's TTL based as well, right? So I assume that's between the two CNEs are the first 2 hops, and then the actual instance on the remote side. So makes sense.
Yep, that's good though. In terms of the network, it's a pretty short, pretty simple setup there.
And just to kind of prove that point, let me ping the pink one, which is production, and this should not work. So hopefully the demigods are on my side. So there we go. So the ping won't let me ping the production one. Awesome.
Right. And it's not that there's a security policy here, right? There's just literally no way to route to that segment. Like that. Is that
right?
Exactly. So I'll show you the routes in the background while we're looking at it. So this is the ping test. So just imagine dev can talk to dev, dev can't talk to prod. And if I go into any of the prod instances, prod won't be able to talk to prod either because we have isolated those attachments. So again, if I do that, trust me, it will not ping, but I can show you the routes behind it. So let's look at how we can go about proving this, right? So let's have a look at going back to our instances, cancel out of here. Let me get out of this tab, and let's look at. Let's go back to VPCs over here for 1 second, and let's see if I have got any peering connections, right? Who knows? I might have some peering magic going in the background. All right. So here we go. So in Ohio, I essentially have no peering connections, right? That's the first bit. Let me see if I have any transit gateways over here, right? So that's another possibility, another possible way of connecting as well. Let's have a look. Cool. So I have a PCI transit gateway, which I was doing it for another demo. And let's have a look at the attachments. Do I have that VPC attached to it? No, I don't. So this is a different VPC, right? So if I go into that just to kind of prove it out, I have quite a few VPCs. So this is the prod PCI VPC, which is the one attached to the transit gateway. The Ohio Dev VPC is not attached to the transit gateway, and neither is the Ohio prod VPC. So those two are not attached to a transit gateway. But what I'll show you is how the routes work, right? So let's go to the route table, and this is where the cool magic happens. Let me filter it down because I have a lot of route tables, right? Obviously, I've kind of done it using CDK, so it's done a very cleanly one route table per subnet. So let me just narrow it down for you. So let's go to Ohio Dev VPC and filter it down, right? So my workloads are in a subnet called workload subnet 1 and workload subnet 2. So let's look at the route here. This is where the magic happens. What have I got over here, essentially? Right. So I have said any traffic which is destined for 10.0.0.8, which is essentially a supernet of all my IP addresses or CIDR ranges. Go to this weird ARM, ARM, AWS Network Manager, Core Network, blah, blah, blah. Don't worry about the 192. So that's a part of the second part of the demo, which I'll show you some on-prem connectivity. But essentially what I'm saying here is that any traffic for my overarching network, just send it to the core network, right? I don't want to worry about it. Let core network handle all the routing and stuff. So that's all you need to do, right? Just come into your VPC, your subnets, your route tables, just add that in there, and away you go. And your core network, through your intent-based policy routing, should be able to handle all of that for you. No peering.
Does this behave kind of in the same way that we, when you do it like a VPC attachment to transit gateway, and that these are manually added to the route tables? There's not a propagate option to the VPC table, at least for now.
Correct. Okay. So as of now, I had to go and manually add these in.
Okay.
Correct.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So you had to go into the route table for the dev VPC after attaching it to CloudWAN and grab the ARN and go build this route.
So I don't need to grab the ARN. So let's do that. So when you go add route and let's just do a 0.0, and if you know how it drops down all the different types
core network. That's it. I see it now.
Exactly. So I don't need to grab it for anything. But it has some smarts built around it. But I still had to add a route manually, correct? So it's not like by default, it will just propagate it to all the route tables within the VPC. You're absolutely right. I have to go and manually add that in.
So, I mean, could you have, I'm sorry, real quick, Chris, could you have automated this if you wanted to? Like if
I did, right? Because I am lazy. So what I did was when I deployed the CDK, I'll show you. So that's a good point. I'll show you the CDK. So when I deploy say my Mumbai prod stack, for example, over here, what I'm doing is I'm actually spitting out a CLI version of adding these routes into the route tables, right? Because I'm too lazy. I don't want to go in and do this for, what was it, like 8 times 2, 16 route tables. I don't want to do that. So I essentially created a CLI output. And I'm actually going to copy paste that and do it. So yeah, that's essentially what I did, but manual nonetheless. But if you're doing it via CDK, please automate it. Yeah.
Cool. But just point I realized from this is definitely going to fall outside of your JSON document that you're managing CloudWAN with, right? You would have to integrate this in some other way.
Correct. Yeah. So once you, that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about the DevOps part of it, right? So once you deploy your core network and your application VPC, you attach it. Your network admin goes and accepts this attachment. Then your application, your workload team has to go in and update those routes, right? How would they go about doing it? It's probably lots of different ways of doing it, right? So you could obviously execute some CDK behind it. You'll have to kind of create some kind of sequencing, right? So do it at the right time, because if you add the routes before your attachment, it's going to complain that the core ARN is not available and things like that. Yeah,
of course.
And you're probably doing this across accounts as well, too, right? So if you have your core network built in your central network account, and you're extending these attachments across to other application accounts, then obviously they're going to want to accept the attachment and then build their own static routes to the CNE. So yeah, it totally makes sense.
So this is what I was talking about before, right? So I'm not quite sure if you can see. Let me just copy paste this out. There we go. Copy paste this out into another window. There. So as you can see on the top, I essentially used CDK to output a CLI command to create a route inside each of the route tables towards that core network arm, right? Because I don't want to do it manually for all the different myriads of VPCs and subnets and route tables I had combination of. I just wanted to do it using copy paste quickly. So that's essentially what I did.
Makes sense.
Yeah, especially as the sprawl. This is just in the demo. I imagine in production, you definitely want to do it that way.
Exactly. I highly recommend automating it. Cool. So so you got the ping test, you got that. Let's go back to Network Manager and let's look at this really cool feature which shows you what routes have got an exchange, right? So I really love this feature. I should be using it more. Let's put it that way. So let's go to routes. Yeah, right. So we talked about what happens in the background, right? How does it actually exchange routes and what does it actually do? And how can you actually see what routes to exchange? So let's look at non-prod, because that's a little bit more interesting. The prod one just has isolated segments. So it's not going to show anything. Let's look at non-prod. Let's look at Sydney, for example, and let's look at what routes is exchanged. So over here, you can see two routes, right? So you've got the 10.0.0.0.16, which is coming from a attachment in that region. And there's another route coming from Ohio, which says propagated, so which is 10.4. So this is how we can get those two dev instances talking to each other. And if I go into my Ohio one, it will essentially say the other side of it. So it will say the 10.4 is coming from the VPC attachment, but 10.0 has been propagated to the core network agent USEs 2. And as you can imagine, this gets kind of hairy and bigger as you get more VPC attachments into it, but essentially allowing you to visualize these routes and how it's advertised. Any questions on that?
So when you do I'm assuming that when you make the attachment from, say, a VPC or whatever to the CNE just pulls in, I guess, the VPC CIDR, and that becomes the route for it?
Correct. Cool. And just before you move off the screen, let me just show you prod. And again, this will be quite boring. As you can see, it will have no routes because it has isolated attachments, right? Let's do an attachment. Let's because I think you wanted to have a look at it, didn't you, Tim? So we've got 4 attachments already. We've got US East 2, which is Ohio, and Sydney. Let's do another dev attachment in the Mumbai region. So let me just go back and make sure I get my naming convention correct. I'm quite anal about naming conventions. Although I just get lost if there's too many.
So the isolated segment setting is basically a flag for propagation, right? Is that really all it is under the hood? It's like if it's on, then nothing's going to get propagated. If it's off, then all attachments will get propagated. Is that how it works?
It's essentially, yeah. Mm-hmm. If you look at obviously, I don't know how that flag is implemented in the background, but from the surface, it looks like that's what it's doing. Cool. Exactly right. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. So attachment types, we have quite a few. So we talked about the GRE Connect one. We talked about VPC. I'm going to demonstrate a transit gateway route table as well. And I won't have time to demonstrate the VPN or the Connect one, but you have those options for now. What we're doing in this one is a VPC attachment. Let's look at the... I was going to do dev because my name says dev. See, this is why naming convention is so important. Cool.
IPv6 support. That's good.
Yeah, that's right.
Good, you got it.
Good, we got it. Great. So again, similar to transit gateway attachments, when you attach a VPC to your transit gateway, you get a selection of which subnet you want to drop that CloudWAN attachment into. So I have created CloudWAN subnets, CloudWAN specific subnets as well. So good to kind of do that. You create a TGV subnet or a firewall subnet. You should create a CloudWAN subnet as well. Just kind of keep things kind of nice and clean. So let me select those: CloudWAN subnet 2, CloudWAN subnet 1, 3 availability zones because that's what I'm using. And this is where the magic is, right? So if you can see tags on the bottom, I can right now go and create an attachment, right? It's just not going to do anything. It's not going to attach it to any segment because my segment policy, none of the rules in my segment policy will be triggered because I haven't got any tags in there.
Right.
So how would I go about attaching it? So let's do that. So I would do network and I would do non-prod, right? So let's have a look at that. So, cool. With me so far. Any questions on the screen before I move off it?
So I noticed that one of the attachments was specifically a TGW route table, not like a TGW attachment. How does that? I guess how's that end up working?
Correct. Yeah. So it's quite interesting. So with and I've got a demo as well of this if you do have time. I know we're just kind of flying through the hour already. So with the TGW, so when you attach, not to be sorry, I think this is all important stuff. As you attach a transit gateway to your CloudWAN, you're not really attaching that itself. You're saying this is my route table, and this is what all the routes from that route table I want to propagate into the core network, right? So it needs to know where to send traffic to, etc. So it's actually going to send it to that route table, and that's what you're attaching. So that's what the attachment type is. It's your transit gateway route table.
Right. And so if your transit gateway is similarly segmented, you could do multiple attachments for like prod, non-prod, so on and so forth, based on the route table of TGW. Makes sense. Exactly
right. So with so the way you would attach a transit gateway into your core network is you would create a peering first. So there's always a one-to-one relationship with a peering and a transit gateway. But once you create that peering, you could create attachments with any number of route tables in the transit gateway. So you could have a prod one, you could have a VPN on-prem, and you could have a dev one. And that's exactly what I've got if I do have a chance to get to the transit gateway demo part as well. And that's essentially exactly what I've got before that. So we'll dive into that.
Just a VPN v4 peering, probably. That's that seems like it's probably what's...
at the end of the day.
Right. That's cool. I like that.
That's very cool, man.
Awesome. So let's create the attachment. And again, it will go away. It will take a wee while to attach this. But on the left, let me just... cool. There we go. As you can see, it's got a state of creating. It figured out that it's going to be attaching to the non-prod segment. And it's telling you which policy rule, which is 100, which is your priority list, which triggered the segment attachment. So this will take a wee while.
Real quick, Ruskin. So now, basically, from a workflow perspective, the next thing you would want to do is, run your automation. Once this is finished attaching, you wouldn't want to run your automation to go into that VPC that you just attached and add those routes for the CloudWAN, right?
Yep, exactly right. So even though the routes are getting propagated with your core network edge, we can go into the routes of the core network, which I was showing you before, the AP South and all that. Even though you'll see the route there, the route table of the VPC doesn't know to send traffic to the core network edge. Exactly right. Let me do the other one as well. So this is my dev. Let me do the prod one as well while I'm here. Let's try and kill two birds with one stone. So I'll go with this a little bit faster because we've already been through this. Prod. Cool. Let me just make sure I select the right subnets. There we go. CloudWAN. And this will be network.
The amount of stuff that this abstracts away is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I gotta say. It
makes it cool,
isn't it? There's so much steps you can skip. Yeah.
It's nice. Yeah. There's a lot of steps in the middle that are being cut out by this.
Yeah. I mean, like VPC in one region to, VPC in another, just pinging, like that would be a lot of steps to get that set up usually for it to just work so easily.
Yeah. And you can imagine what I've got. 6 VPCs, and and it's so easy. Imagine if you have thousands, right?
Right.
And you're
exactly.
bringing like at a rate of like not every time into your branches or something like that.
It's
not
amazing. Just three regions either, like more regions and way more instances, and everything.
Thousands of VPCs. Yeah, the enterprise scale stuff, the really big business scale stuff would make it untenable to do it the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So now you see that the old-fashioned way. Everything you did yesterday was old-fashioned, right? So it's that technical depth thing.
Right.
So that state has gone into pending, if you notice that. So essentially, I've attached something to prod. So what I do have to do is select that and accept it on the top. So this is that flag coming into play, which says that I have to explicitly accept that.
Nice. I forgot that setting was on for prod that we had said, you have to accept the attachment.
Yeah, so let me accept it. Cool, happy with that. And we'll go away and start creating the attachment.
And that attachment policy, the way it's built, so you have specific rule numbers. I assume that's a top-down process ordering, right? And stops on the first match?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, I haven't actually tried if changing the priority and, playing around with it. So it's like, do I want to make it complex? I mean, I could spend days on this, right? And just to get cool behaviors out of it.
Yeah.
But it's CloudWAN is so cool. I don't need to worry about making policies complicated.
Yeah, no, but you can. The thing is that if you have the use case, you can get, I imagine, fairly granular with it, especially when you start combining tags with end or being able to do ORs and stuff like that. The options there. While we're waiting for this, I wanted to ask, and I think I probably already know the answer, but I think it's probably worth asking because I know a lot of customers are doing this. Is this impacted at all by the shared VPC model? Where the network team owns the VPC but shares out subnets to sub accounts and stuff like that. I imagine not, because of course you would put the CloudWAN attachment in I assume a network owned CloudWAN subnet. But I'm curious if there's any impact whatsoever to the shared VPC model with CloudWAN.
Not that I know from the top of my head. You're exactly right. So as you saw, I had a gazillion subnets. The network team would kind of own the subnets where the core network edge attachments are going into, and they would just kind of not share those, and they would share the workload subnets, for example. I think it would just work as is. No impact I can think of at this stage from the top of my head.
Yeah, it makes sense.
All right, let's have a look at the routes. The dev one obviously has attached. Let's have a look. Oh, here we go. Let's look at non-prod and let's look at AP Southeast 2. So we should see 3 here if everything's working okay. Awesome. So we've got 10.0, which is the attachment from that region itself. We got 2 and 4. So the way I've done it, I've got non-prod as even side arranges. I'm not sure if you noticed, and prod as odd. And if we go to prod again, we shouldn't see anything there, obviously, because we are the isolate attachment flag is set to true. Let me show you something else as well. Let's look at events. So I remember we talked a little bit about this in the previous talk, in the previous podcast we did about how do you actually look at stuff happening in the background and how do you understand what routes are propagated or advertised. So all of this information, all of these events which are happening, attachments and things like that are all going to CloudWatch, right? And over here you can see, for example, that a VPC attachment was made, which edge location it was, and what routes got propagated. So let me have a look at that as well. There we go. Routes in one segment has been installed. What is that route? It's 10.016. It tells you which segment it was. All the cool stuff you need to kind of diagnose.
That's really useful.
That's really nice.
Yeah,
man.
Extremely. Yep.
I mean, literally everything you'd want to know, it's like right here. That's awesome.
Exactly, and I can just imagine some cool tools being built around this, right, to kind of visualize it and workflow, create a workflow from it and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's definitely some ways to pull out all that data and put it into some kind of cool time series, database, and just have some cool representation of it.
So what's under the monitoring tab then? Not to get too far off the beaten path, but since we have that tab, I'd love to see.
Yeah, it gives you that single pane of glass across. Your
so like kind of a
CloudWatch,
more or less like a CloudWatch dashboard, essentially, is what we're looking at here.
Exactly. But across your whole core network edge, right? So across all your VPCs and attachments and things like that, gotcha. And you can change it across there as well. Yeah. It's got usage. Awesome. I haven't played around with much data being sent back and forth, so there are some pings going out here and there, but that's pretty much it.
Monitoring is the boring stuff. We don't.
That's yeah. So that's actually the chapter that I've been writing for the ANS book that Chris and I are working on. So I'm all of a sudden very interested in monitoring because I've been writing this chapter about all the AWS monitoring and operations stuff. So I was curious.
It's quite funny how that works, doesn't it? Like, I'm suddenly doing this blog post. So I'm going to dive deep into this topic, which I don't usually care about. So I'm going to dive
exactly.
deep into it. No, fair enough. Good on you. I like that. Yeah. What else have we can cover? Oh, we haven't looked at graphs and topological trees, essentially like a visual representation of your network. I like these views quite a lot. It shows you the different core network edges, the regions, and the actual VPC attachments around it as well. So if you want to if you're a visual person like myself, you can have a little bit of a play around with it and actually visualize what's connected to what in the background. You can even see what segments are connected and how that actually plays a part. You've got prod, which VPC is connected to prod, etc. So yeah, a lot of cool things. I feel it really simplifies that global network for you, right? I mean, I can't stress that enough. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks good. I think the tree is basically just another version of that, which branches outward from the connectivity, I assume. Yeah,
exactly right. So yeah, this is a little bit more of a structured view of doing it. So what segments you have, VPCs, and I think you can actually collapse them down as well, so to get like a little bit of a cleaner view into it too. Yeah.
Very cool.
You gotta have that. Yep. You gotta have the collapsing and uncollapsed.
You don't want to paint 4,000 VPCs on one page here.
No, definitely not. That's cool. There's a logical view as well. Again, if you wanted to have a look at that one.
This must be organized by segment. Okay, yeah, it is.
Yep. So it's got non-prod, and you can see attachments. Exactly right. Yeah, and I like the filter by, because right now we're just looking at a very small network distributed network. Obviously, but if you're looking at thousands and stuff like that, that filtering capability on the top will be so important, right? Half the time you might not even care about your non-prod one, because your prod one is the one you care about, so you can just kind of filter it down and look at that. So this is really cool.
Yeah, it's great just to have the options. I mean, just the graph, the graph itself is awesome, but then being able to filter is very, very helpful.
100%.
I can also see here that these graphs and topology trees also map out the TGW route tables as well. We don't have any on the graph right now, but I see that's an option in the legend there. So that's cool too, that you can see all the way across TGW as well.
Any other questions? So what have we got so far? Let's go back to our presentation, right? So we've got we attached a prod VPC, a dev VPC from Mumbai. We can do a ping test, but take my word for it. It's not the interesting part, but yeah.
What do we have left in the demo that we wanted to cover? I know we wanted to talk about shared segments, which you've got up there.
We've got shared segments. We've also got on-premises as well. So this is essentially looking at bringing in a transit gateway federated model, right? So in the CloudWAN talk, which we did before, we talked about how would you bring an existing transit gateway autonomous system built around transit gateway into your CloudWAN. You could migrate it or you could federate it, right? So I was going to do a quick demo of how would you bring that kind of existing system into your CloudWAN construct and start just making it part of your distributed network, your global distributed network. Let's go through that. Actually, I think that'll be quite cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, honestly, if we had time, we could do. I'd love to see every bit of it, but yeah, I know that's probably a bit long to do for everybody. But no, I would love to see this.
All right, let's do the transit gateway. So the good thing about this is I've already got it all set up, so we won't waste time setting up the transit gateway and things like that. But essentially, what I've got is I've got two side arranges or subnets on the on-premises side, and this is essentially emulated via VPCs and AWS. So don't judge me for that. And I've got a VPN, a software-based VPN connectivity terminating into a transit gateway. And on the AWS side, I've already got a couple of VPCs, which is my Sydney Dev and Sydney Prod. And what I've actually made a rule over here to say that the dev on my on-premises should be only allowed to talk to dev on the AWS side, and my prod on-premises should only be allowed to talk to prod on AWS side as well. And I was going to demonstrate how you can extend that requirement into the segmentation constructs in CloudWAN as well. So let's do that. Cool. Let me close off these tabs on top. Cool. And while we're on this, let me just go to the Sydney one and just kind of show you how it is set up. Where did we go? Transit gateway. There we go. So this is my transit gateway. So this is my CloudWAN on-prem transit gateway, and it has a few attachments. As you can see, so 2 VPC attachments and 1 VPN attachment, right? So it kind of matches the diagram on the right here. As you can see, the VPN coming from the on-premises side and my 2 VPCs on the left-hand side.
Right.
So for the purpose of this exercise, because I want that dev to dev segmentation and prod to prod segmentation, plus this extra VPN layer, which I've got representing on-premises, I needed to set up 3 transit gateway route tables, right? So currently, as it stands, these transit gateway route tables aren't associated to CloudWAN, but this is the question you asked earlier, right? So why would you attach a route table rather than the transit gateway itself? So this is essentially to do that, fine-grained routing.
Right.
So we've got a VPN route table, and we talked about this as well, which essentially sends traffic to on-premises. We've got a non-prod route table and a prod route table as well. So that's and we're essentially going to bring this into transit gateway. So let's have a look at that. Cool. Let's go to. So before we do that, let's go to core network one more time. As I mentioned, currently, there are only 2 segments, prod and non-prod. So to bring this kind of construct into your CloudWAN setup, sometimes you need to change segments or add segments to represent the on-premises network as well, right? So essentially, that's what we need to do right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a new policy here, right? So let's go and create a policy. And I'm going to do it via JSON to save time because I already got one prepared. So let's have a look at that. So that was version 4, if I remember correctly. Yep. Copy, paste it. And essentially what I am doing now is it's still the same edge locations. I'm not adding a new edge location. All I'm doing is I am adding a on-prem segment in there, right? Don't worry about the shared segment because it's a build on from the previous one, but we can completely just kind of ignore that. And all I've got over here is the rules are still the same. Shared segment, which is your prod. I'm going to share prod attachment, anything with prod with on-prem.
Right.
So that's the rule. Right. So because I want to send all prod traffic to on-prem, because remember, on-prem also has a prod subnet as well, right? I'm going to share my non-prod segment with on-prem as well, right? So because the
Right.
on-prem also has a non-prod subnet as well. And I am going to share my shared segment with everything. So that's my sharing
Makes
policy
sense.
I've set up. Yep. Attachment policies again, 100, we've already looked at it. That's for non-prod. 200, we've looked at it. That's for prod. We have got another one for 300, which is the shared network. So anything with the tag value of shared will go into the shared segment. And finally, anything with a tag value of on-prem VPN will go into the on-prem VPN segment. So that's essentially what we're doing, right? We're bringing in 2 new segments, shared segment and an on-prem segment, and we've got some rules set up. Cool. Let's create a policy.
I mean, that's super easy to follow.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
awesome. That is that
See if
easy.
there's an association method that was set to constant. What is, are there other options for that?
Let's dive into that. So let's have a look which one you were talking about. So association method. This one. Oh, that's just that's what association you're doing when the tag value equals. So that's essentially me saying that anything which matches that tag type attached to the segment. So it's the same way we did the previous one.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Or you could make it variable as well, right?
Right. It's constant because you've declared that that's the name of the tag. I see. Now, the VPN from on-site to the TGW, even though you have segments on-site, it's just one VPN, right? So is that accurate? So there's not okay.
So this is where, because I wanted to do cool stuff, I made it slightly complicated for myself, right?
Okay.
Because I wanted to have, again, same old, I'm quite lazy. I use CDK, I use automation. I wanted to have a dev and prod subnet in the back on the on-prem using one VPN. And because of the way I've done it, I've got some black hole routes to show you as well. And because of it going through one VPN. Because we're going through one VPN, you have to be quite careful that anything on any dev connectivity on your AWS side shouldn't be able to talk to prod. Because it's going through one VPN, you essentially can if you're not careful enough.
Right.
Because it's going through one VPN. So I'll show you some black route magic I've done on the transit gateway side to stop that from happening. But if you have 2 VPNs, one for dev and one for prod, you won't face this complexity, right?
Right. That was my question. Okay.
Yeah.
And while we're waiting, I have to ask, when is the Direct Connect integration coming?
Oh, he asked all the hard questions.
I
I
mean, it makes
had to
sense,
get it
though.
out. I had to get it out at some point. Yeah.
I mean, if TGW is always going to be the front end, then so be it. But yeah, it seems like you'd want this to be part of the CloudWAN piece.
Yeah, we are hearing it loud and clear from our customers. I don't have a date, unfortunately. All I can say is watch the space.
Yeah.
No, fair enough. You have to ask. It's all good. Cool. Another cool feature I want to show you is that comparison, right, of different change sets and policies. So let's compare these two. Again, if you want to go in and have a look at how your policies have changed, this is a nice little visualization of seeing, what's changed. Is this legitimate, or can I question the person who's making the change? Are they including some kind of interesting segment and sharing everything? What's going on? So you can actually go in through and see the different changes people have made and how they're impacting, how they could potentially impact the network as well. So that's a pretty cool way of visualizing it. Cool. So now let's apply the change set. So this is where we'll have to make up some conversation here, right? So we've got how many, 29 changes. It's adding a few new segments and it's doing a few cool things. It's going to take a wee while to distribute the change out, right? So let me apply this change set. And let's ask heaps of questions, actually one thing I want to show you while this is happening. So it's executing here. We'll come back to it. We don't need to worry about it. One thing I want to show you, this really cool feature I like is this devices and sites which you see on the left, right? So if you have a VPN in some location, right, some geographical location, you can actually represent that logically in CloudWAN using this thing called a site, right? So what I've done for this one is, because I have an on-premise data center, I wanted to say that my on-premise data center is a home office and it's in Auckland. So the way I did that is I just created a site and I gave it a lat long, and essentially it shows up in a site in the sites table. And I did the exact same thing with a device. So I have a device in my home office for my VPN. I'm currently using a Strong Swan software emulated VPN device, and that's in Auckland as well. And you can actually link them up together. So you can say, this is the device, this is the site. And I'll show you when the VPN with the transit gateway connection comes up, and you can the VPN comes about. You can actually associate the VPN to the site. So when you saw that logical view and the tree view in there, you can actually visualize that your VPN is actually at this geographical location, and these are the attributes for it. And I find that really powerful, right? To get that visual mental model of your distributed network, to visualize your branches, to understand what devices are running behind it, the different attributes for it. So it's a really cool way of just capturing that information.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, as part of the writing for the book, the new version of the ANS covers Transit Gateway Network Manager. CloudWAN's not on there yet. But as part of labbing it, I went in and was doing this, building devices and sites and stuff, and it gets quite associative. I don't know how else to say it. There's quite a lot of interdependency you can build. You can build your own links to the devices, and the links can be associated with WAN circuits, and and it's all logical, right? But you can tie it back to AWS resources, like you were saying, Ruskin, with the TGW and your VPNs and stuff. So it's pretty crazy, actually.
Right there, yeah.
Right there, correct. Yep. Yeah, and you can it's like your massive CMDB for your network.
I was just going to say CMDB. Yep, that's exactly right.
And right now, if you go under VPN, there's nothing there because I haven't attached the Transit Gateway VPN into it. But once I do that, you can actually associate the VPN link in here as well, and you can say, by the way, this device is associated to this VPN, and this is the site, and it all kind of maps out nice and pretty, and allows you to kind of visually see it quite nicely.
There's another front end, potential thing for people to gather data and then show on the front end.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed earlier is I can't remember which page it was on. I see there was maybe in the policy configuration page, there was I think there was a range of BGP ASNs that were defined, like a from and to value. Can we what scenario would you use that range for?
So this is for your core network edges, right? So if you have a look at your core network, each core network edge will get an ASN from this range. So let me show you. So if I look at this one, I think I have to look at topology graph.
But that makes sense, right? So each CNE will get a different BGP ASN. So of course you can use any BGP path preferencing and AS path and stuff. That's kind of cool.
Exactly. Correct. Yes. On the right over here, you can see I've selected AP South, and it's got ASN 64513. And if I select another one, AP Southeast 2, it's got the next one in that range. And Ohio will.
What does the metrics thing do on the top right? Details, metrics, events.
Isn't that just the dashboard, the CloudWatch thing?
Yeah, I think that will be the dashboard.
Oh, okay.
Correct.
Yep.
Oh, that's good. So this will obviously help customers that are, very familiar with building, path selection with BGP. They know what defined ranges there are that are going to be coming from CloudWAN into the on-premises environments as well. I'm assuming that these CNEs are all built within a full mesh. So you'd only be, one CNE is only a single hop away from another CNE. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Under the hood again, I don't know the secret sauce, but that's how I would visualize it in my mental model as
Right.
well.
Okay.
Correct. And one of the really cool things is that obviously I'm traditionally I'm not a network guy, right? I come from an application development background, and I haven't customized this as much as I would like to, right? I give it an ASN range. I said, please, CloudWAN, do your magic. I want to do the minimal. You do all the heavy lifting. But it's exposing all these cool levers and configuration parameters for all these network gods who would come in and say, no, I want to customize to the nth degree, right? And they can, right? And that's the whole beauty of it. It achieves for people like myself who just want to come in and set up some quick segmentation models for my application and get my application up and running. Perfect, using CloudWAN. Or to all these gurus in networking who are setting up thousands of sites, and it's their day job, right?
Yeah.
I love that.
That's the cool thing. I mean, this is as simple as you want it to be, or you can deep dive,
as complex as you want it to
really
be.
Do the things that you're used to doing, right? So it's cool. It's like catered to both audiences at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many enterprises out there that are as complex as they have to be because of the shit show that they're running. So, sometimes you have to tune everything because of how fragile and brittle, what you're working with is.
Sound like you're speaking from experience, Tim. I don't know what that's about.
I've inherited a couple. I might have inherited or helped other people with that sort of thing in the past.
Fair enough. He's still reeling from it. It's like, oh, no, I'm over it. Yeah. Next minute he pulls out his notepad.
Those scars.
You never get over it
forever, baby.
Fair enough. Awesome. Cool. So it's done. So that policy has been put in place. So let's bring in our transit gateway network in there. Okay. So the first step we have to do is create a peering with the transit gateway. So let's do that. So let's go create a peering, and I am going to name it hopefully something smart. There we go, CloudWAN on-prem TGW peering. Again, anal about naming conventions. Apologies. It is.
You got to be a little OCD to work on the cloud stuff. So.
Awesome. So it's in the Sydney environment, and it is the CloudWAN on-prem TGW. Do I want to associate it to a policy table? I think I have a policy table already. Let me just double check. Yep, I do have a policy table in place. So this is essentially the policy table CloudWAN will use under the hood to do the routing and things like that. Nothing you need to worry about in terms of management or anything like that. And register the specific transit gateway to the global network. Yes, I want to do that. Tags, it doesn't really matter. This is not the attachment. This is just the peering. So you can give it some tags as you need to. So let's create that peering.
Now, if your transit gateway was dedicated to a specific segment, would it make sense to pull that whole transit gateway and it wouldn't matter? Like if you have VPCs that are peered to the transit gateway, and then you're pulling the transit gateway into CloudWAN. Would that make sense to put the whole transit gateway in a particular segment?
No, so you're not putting transit gateway into a particular segment, right? You're putting the route tables and associating those to the segments, right? So this is essentially peering your transit gateway. So it is a two-step process. So I think if you're looking at your mental model, you bring your transit gateway in, and then you can choose to dice and slice it at a route
tables
level.
themselves.
Correct.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Okay. Yeah.
And that transit gateway policy table, that's just unique to the transit gateway itself, right? That's not a construct that's built in CloudWAN, right?
No, it's not built into CloudWAN. It is a transit gateway policy table for transit gateway, but it's essentially what CloudWAN uses to interact with transit gateway to do that kind of VRF function sort of routing we talked about, right? So it is a policy table which handles that kind of routing. Again, it's all abstracted away from you. So when I look into let's go into transit gateway, and let's look at the policy table over here. there's nothing you can do with it, right? There's nothing you need to do with it. You can see it. You can see some associations with it, whatever associations there might have been. But there's nothing like you can go and edit it, right? CloudWAN does that for you at this stage. So it's essentially that association which is creating. So it's going to take a wee while that's happening.
What was the so this register the specific transit gateway to the global network checkbox? What's that for?
So this allows you to visualize. So I think in the previous one, so you can have a global network without a core network, right? And you could register your transit gateways into your global network and visualize it, and you get that single panel glass. So essentially, that's what it's doing for you here. Yeah.
I gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. I think you actually talked about that in the past. I feel like you've brought that exact scenario up.
Yeah, just bring it in just for monitoring purposes, right?
Yeah. Right. Yep. Exactly. So so you peer the steps here, just talking through what's coming up. So you have to do this peering, and then you have to build the attachment.
Correct. So let's go back to the deck a little bit, right? So we've got your dev, your dev kind of segment, or your dev routing domain, and your prod routing domain and transit gateway. So the peering essentially says, I am ready to bring this transit gateway into CloudWAN. And then the way I'm going to do it after that is I'm going to create 3 attachments into CloudWAN, right? So the first attachment will help me communicate to on-premises. So essentially all my CloudWAN Glory and all the VPCs I've already got existing on CloudWAN, on the CloudWAN segments, they should be able to communicate to on-prem. So that's my first attachment. The next attachment, I'm going to say, cool, now how I'm going to bring traffic from on-prem to the AWS site, right? So these are my dev and my prod attachments. So I'll create 3 attachments. And again, I needed to do it a slightly complicated way because I was lazy and I only wanted 1 VPN connection. But if you have 2 VPN connections, then you only need 2 route tables, right? One is essentially going directly into your dev segment, and another one going directly into your prod segment. So again, lots of ways you can kind of dice it and slice it. It's just the way I've set up. I needed to do it using 3 attachments, but only with 1 peering, right? So it's just 1 peering with transit gateway.
Right.
I would say that's still going to be a very common scenario for customers, right? Because there's, probably, they'll have direct connect with a single transit VIF to on-prem, right? And there's no actual distinction on, what traffic is prod, what's dev. And so you're going to have to control that in other ways, right?
Yeah, the way I'm doing it is through transit gateway route tables. Customers might do it using their on-prem route tables as well, but right now, because I'm just doing an emulated environment, I need to kind of build some black hole routes and things like that. So there's lots of ways you can do it. You can do it fully on-prem, so nothing on-prem can talk to any of those CIDRs, or you can do it at the transit gateway level, or you can do it at the CloudWAN level, right? So there's lots of levers and positions and opportunities where you can actually build that security model you want to enforce.
And then once all those 3 attachments are set up, do you have to go back to the transit gateway to do anything?
No, not at this stage, because let's have a look at the transit gateway while this is happening. So the way I've done it is, because I already had part of the demo set up, I've kind of cheated in a way. So let's look at my VPN route table. And so you've got the VPN route table. Let's have a look at the non-prod one. So this is where you'll see the black hole routes which I've added, right? So I've essentially said that if you're coming from non-prod, you shouldn't be able to talk to production subnets on premises, right? So if you have a look at this 192.678, and if you have a look at my presentation over here, these are the prod ones. So essentially what I'm saying is the dev on AWS shouldn't be able to talk to prod on-prem, and the other way around for non-prod other way around for prod and dev. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, yeah, it does. This is, yeah, like you said, it's like your magic way around some of the limitations. Okay. Is this, I mean,
Correct,
do you
yeah.
see people doing this actually?
So yes, because the way I've set up is because I'm using one VPN, right? So all my
Right.
connection, all my
Yeah.
traffic needs to go to that one VPN. And I don't have any control. The way I've set up my VPN is how would I ensure? I mean, I could do it via security groups and stuff like that, which can emulate, your firewalls on-prem. But I just wanted to be very explicit, right? So the way I've done it is because all my traffic is going through this one tunnel, which is the VPN, and behind the tunnel I have dev and prod. I need some way of saying, okay, how do I ensure that I can send non-prod traffic to non-prod, but any traffic coming from non-prod, which is destined for production via this link, should be black holed, right? And Transit Gateway was the easiest way for me to kind of put that routing in.
Makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
Ideally, I would have two VPNs, make it so much easier. But
Right.
and the same with same with prod, right? So if I go to prod, and if you have a look at routes, it's the inverse of that, right? So the prod on the left-hand side shouldn't be able to talk to dev, which is subnet side is 345. Cool. Let's have a look at my. Oh, yep, peering is up. Awesome. So this is what it looks like. And if I look at my, how you were asking about the little checkbox, if I look at transit gateways over here, it will show up in here as well. So it allows you to kind of see that from a monitoring perspective, right? So there we go. So how you asked me about what that checkbox does if you want to bring it into the global network. So you can bring it in without actually having a core network. Actually just look at it, and monitor it and have that single pane of glass. Awesome. So I have, actually, let me see if I can link up that device now with my VPN now that I've got it. On-premise associate, customer gateway. Yes, I can. There we go.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So there we go.
Okay.
So now if I go to my beautiful transit gateway visualization and look at my topology tree, hopefully it should tell me that my VPN is connected to my home office VPN across this link, across this customer gateway, across this VPN, across to tunnel 1 and tunnel 2. So it gives
That's
you
really
that
cool.
whole linkage.
And this is why it's important to
I like
be
that.
anal about your naming conventions, because every single thing gets a name.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's good.
Awesome. All right. So let's do those attachments now, right? So we've got the peering in. Let's bring the on-prem attachment. So hopefully, there we go. So this is my on-prem VPN attachment is in Asia Pacific, and this will be my transit gateway route table attachment. And this is where you select that peering we just created, right? So remember, we are creating multiple attachments over the same peering. Yeah, and this will be my on-prem transit gateway VPN route table. And remember, the tag will be network and on-prem VPN, if I remember it correctly. Cool, so that's one attachment created. Cool, so it's going into segment on-prem VPN, which is good. Let me create the two other attachments. So this will be on-prem non-prod attachment. Choose the same Asia Pacific. I'm just going to go a little bit faster, but just stop me if you need to ask me any questions. This will be non-prod, which is this one. Network, non-prod, create attachment. Cool, here we go. And one more. So this will be my on-prem prod attachment. Transit gateway peering, the same one, and this will be prod. Cool. Network prod. So as these attachments are coming up, if I go back to the transit gateway route tables, you will see more routes being coming into these route tables as the attachments are getting created. And this is where you'll know that how would you get the connectivity from on-prem to AWS and vice versa. So let's have a look and wait for those routes to come up. Yep.
Right. So this one updates automatically.
Correct. Yep. Oh, yep. I need to accept it. I keep forgetting that. Cool. So we've got 3 routes coming up. And yeah, you can see the resource type. It says transit gateway route table, right? Not transit gateway. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's look at the visualizations. I think that the visualization should have updated, but it's got a really cool, it shows the transit gateway quite nicely as well. Topology tree. There we go. So it's got the transit gateway coming in over here. It's got one with the prod as well down there. And where did the non-prod one go? Non-prod, prod, and there should be one more for on-prem. Might be still happening in the background. Yeah, and you see that home office one as well. Nice and green over here, showing up the state available. Cool. So it's all kind of coming together nicely. Anything else? Oh yeah, there we go. So the on-prem one has shown up here. Again, yeah, just kind of keeps updating the diagramming as it gets more complicated, as you need to keep visualizing it. Same thing again, if you go to events, you'll see a whole bunch of routes coming on board. The 192s getting installed, etc. So let's see if we can spot the 192s anywhere. Cool. Network has been created. Transit gateway route table attachments creating and appearing, so it might take a wee while. Yeah, so it's just very cool to kind of see that audit trail of everything happening as you go, and as you wanted to understand what changes cause different behaviors, you can actually go back and see and understand it, right? Which is
very
great.
Valuable just to see. I mean, looking at topology changes in your BGP table is already difficult as it is. So, just having a log of all this stuff would be great for sure.
Exactly. Cool. So this is your transit gateway route table attachment created. That's good. Yeah. So before in a little while, you'll see some routes being advertised as well. Let me go and refresh up here, see if the routes are coming through. Nope, not yet. Not yet. Not yet. Cool, still creating. Awesome. So they are all up and going. So hopefully this doesn't call me a liar. Let's have a look. So this is my on-prem DGW VPN route, which is good, 1092. Let me see if it has propagated over here. No, it hasn't propagated the routes yet. Why haven't you propagated the routes yet? Let me have a look at my routes. And look at the routes. Hopefully it shows non-prod, AP Southeast 2. Cool, still taking a little bit of a while, so just hold on. Yeah, because over here I would expect the 192s to come up as well, right? And my non-prod. But my prod shouldn't show up here because I've still got isolated segments enabled. So that's okay. But my non-prod one should show up. Let's look at events. See, this is where you're getting impatient. It's like, why is it not doing it quickly enough? Yeah.
Those routes from the VPN made it into the transit gateway, didn't they?
Yep. Routes into, no, those were the black holes I think you were saying. Okay, so one of the routes has gone pushed through, which is 192.168. Let's have a look at routes again. Prod. Oh, it's non-prod. AP subs 2. No, it hasn't come across just as yet. Sorry, which one was the one you saw in Transit Gateway?
No, I guess what I was saying is because ultimately the transit gateway is peered to CloudWAN,
there we
right?
go.
So for the routes, so for the routes to end up in CloudWAN, they first have to show up on the transit gateway.
Of course, sorry. So I see what you're saying. Yep. So now they show up here. So you can see all the 10.0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 have shown up in the VPN. So essentially everything on my AWS side can talk to everything on-prem. Let's see my non-prod. Cool. So my non-prod routes have shown up. Remember, it's even numbers, but with the black hole. So that's good to go. And my prod one will be the odd numbers, which is 1, 3, 5. Awesome. And fingers crossed, pray to the demo gods, and hopefully this should show up over here as well. Cool. So my prod ones are showing up as well. So this is the interesting bit, right? So did I change the isolated one? I think I might have. Give me 1 second. I'll double check that. I think I did reset that flag. Cool. I would expect a 192 route showing up here as well, but I think that's because it's going all to the VPN, depending on how I've done it. So the VPN, I'm just thinking what I've set up. Sorry, just give me 1 second.
Yeah. When you pulled in the route table, the TGW route table for non-prod, was it, did you have the tags to set it to the non-prod segment? I wasn't paying attention.
I did, yes. So if I look at my policy versions, let me just verify that.
Because I agree, that's what I would have expected as well.
Oh, yep. So there we go. So my policy, I've changed it. So my isolated attachments has now gone to no, which is okay. I must have copy pasted that setting across. So that explains that. My attachments, just to make sure this is working as well. So I've got a on-prem VPN attachment. So that's with the on-prem route table, which is good. The prod attachment is with the prod segment, which is good. And that should be in the prod route table. And my non-prod one is in the non-prod. So I think it's okay.
And did we enable sharing from on-prem VPN or the on-prem segment to the prod and non-prod segments?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same. Because the route table from the VPN, it looks like should be all of those 192s, or it should be just it's supposed to get everything that comes in from on-prem, right? Basically.
Correct. Yeah. So the way I've set up this one, this is essentially anything in the prod. Anything you see on the prod side of this TGW network is associated to that route table.
Right. But you have 3 different TGW route tables, right? So prod, non-prod, and on-prem, and you've associated each one of those with the appropriate segment. Yeah. So I'm thinking that if there's prod workloads in the on-prem VPN connection, then that means the prod segment, the on-prem segment needs to be shared with the other two. And that's what I'm wondering. Did we do that under the core network settings or not?
I think we did. Let's do a quick ping test. I think it's working as expected. I'm just getting my routings mixed up a little bit. So let's go into Ohio. Cool. And let's look at the Ohio dev demo instance and just connect into that. And let me see if I can ping 192.168 which is the on-prem one, right? Oops. Yep. So it's working. Now we just have to figure out why it's working and try and understand it. So, and let me see if I can ping the production one, which I shouldn't be able to. Nope. So the production one is working as well. So something has gone a little bit weary there. Live debugging, love it. So this is my what's it, 10.4.
It's not a demo until something breaks.
It's not a demo until something breaks. Exactly right. So this is my Ohio dev is connecting to my corporate. Yeah, it shouldn't be able to send it to this IP address, right? So because my dev shouldn't be able to connect to my corporate prod machines. So something's not quite correct.
Maybe when you copied the policy over, you actually accidentally made a connection policy between some of this stuff.
Let's verify that as well. Let's have a look at policy versions 16. Just make sure I haven't got anything weird. Sheet segment, that looks okay. Sharing.
Okay, so you do have non-prod share with on-prem and prod share with on-prem.
So sharing, is that a two-way, like if I see the segment is shared with these other segments, is that a one-way communication or a two-way communication?
No, it should allow both ways. But the thing is, I do have black holes in the on-prem, on the on-prem side, right? So if I look at this route here, that's right. I don't have black holes here, right? So now let me show you something. Yes, I missed that part. So let me go into. Let me close this. Let me go into the Sydney one, and let me log into my 10.98.3.158. So this is the one with the dev shouldn't be able to talk to dev. So that should be blocked at least. Oh, sorry, dev shouldn't be able to talk to prod. So Sydney dev CloudWAN demo instance 10.0.3. Nope, that's 10.98 I need. This one, 10.98.15. Let me connect to this one. And let me hit this one. So, ping. Okay, so that works. So dev to dev is working. And let me ping the production. This shouldn't work. I don't expect it to work. Cool. So that's working because the black holes are stopping me at the transit gateway level, but I don't have any black holes at the CloudWAN level. That's why my connection is all going through that through that one VPN pipe. So I'll need some more black holes on the CloudWAN side to block that as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I confused people a little bit there, but yeah. So it's quite interesting the way you. Yeah, exactly. It's not
a demo until something breaks, man.
And yes, working with CloudWAN, as you can see, it really simplifies complex things as well. But at the same time, naming conventions, just making sure you've got the routing policy correct. Everything is so important to get that intent-based policy working and testing it all out.
Yeah, absolutely. Naming is very important.
Cool. Any other things which we can demo or dive a little bit deeper into? But I think that brings us to a good conclusion. Getting Transit Gateway connected into our existing CloudWAN using a federated model, verifying some ping test, getting some ping tests wrong, all part of the demo. Anything else which can potentially be looked into?
I don't have anything at the moment. I don't know about you, Alex, Tim. Anything else from you guys?
No, this was great, man. Thanks for putting in the time. I know there's an awful lot to it, so it was good to to see basically what the options were.
Yeah, it was awesome. I think we covered enough different walkthroughs to kind of show just how it would work in all different kinds of scenarios. So it's awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. As you can see, it gets pretty complicated as you bring in more and more moving parts, right? So it's good to kind of get the basics right and understand how it all works in the background, and then build from there.
100%. Yeah, I think you did a great job of showing the power and the capabilities that are built into this, from day one that, would have taken, hours and hours to accomplish on with other constructs, even from AWS, let alone using, proper networking tools on-prem, right? So, well, that's cool. So let's, we'll wrap it up there. And like I said, once again, thanks again, Ruskin, for coming on, doing all this for us. This has been very valuable. And for the viewers out there, if this has been a Cloud Demystified demo portion of the Cables to Clouds Cloud Demystified series. So, like I said, if you're not familiar with Cables to Clouds, we run a hybrid cloud focused podcast as part of the Art of Network Engineering podcast network. We'll put all the links to things there for CloudWAN, for our podcast, for Ruskin's info. So if you want to reach out to us, definitely feel free to do that. You can contact us at cablestoclouds@gmail.com. You can reach out to us on Twitter and things like that. We're not going to call it X yet. We're still going to call it Twitter for the time being. So this has been great. And stay tuned. Hit the subscribe button if you want more content later on. And we'll talk to you next time. All right. Cheers. Bye, guys.